Hi, this is Jim Gaughran, State Senator. Thank you for joining us tonight. And tonight is an environmental town hall where we will be talking about some of the issues that we're facing up in Albany, the challenges, but I think more importantly, the opportunities we have to really start to continue to turn our state around and move us in a better direction. And we already have a bunch of questions that have come in from email, so I'm going to be pretty quick in the opening remark because I really want to spend the time answering your questions. But you know, we have done a lot in the past few years in the state legislature, dealing with a whole bunch of environmental issues, whether it's banning plastic bags, or banning offshore drilling, banning toxic toys, legislation that I have written that gives municipal water entities the ability to sue polluters, which is now law and which is now being used by many of our different water districts and water authority in suing polluters, people that sold household chemicals or other products, fertilizers, et cetera, that they knew would one day get into Long Island's drinking water. And that is important because as we deal with emerging contaminants and other issues, including legacy contaminants, what we have in the ground from decades ago, this gives us the ability to go after the people that actually caused the pollution in the first place, rather than always putting the bill on the taxpayers. And you know, this year the voters approved elevating environmental protections for New York citizens in our state constitution. And you know, when I heard of this, when I first got elected as a proposal, it seemed to me, well, why isn't that the case? Well, it wasn't the case. And now it is. And now so every New Yorker is entitled to clean air, clean water, and a clean environment, which gives New Yorkers the rights, including going into court, and gives public officials such as myself, and even at the local level, the requirement now under our state constitution to make sure that all actions we are taking, we are doing as much as we can to make sure, first of all, we're not creating an environmental problem, and secondly, we're moving forward in a way that is positive along the environmental front. And we have the Environmental Bond Act, which we passed, which will be on the ballot in 2022. It also authorizes bonds of up to $3 billion. And the executive, Kathy Hochul, our new governor, has proposed to increase it to $4 billion. And that is something that will be up to you, the voters, in November of 2022. Probably the biggest, most expansive bill we passed, which I was proud to co-sponsor, was the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA. And this is really a groundbreaking bill. I believe, and many believe, that it is the strongest bill to deal with the climate crisis in the United States of America, with goals of 2030, 2040, to get us to 100% off of fossil fuels, 2030 at 70%, 2040 at 100%, and then also dealing with the issue of moving us to electric vehicles. This is a game changer. It has already resulted in victories because fossil fuel burning companies are no longer investing in New York State because they understand that our state policy is moving in the opposite direction, and we are getting all sorts of new businesses coming into the state, entrepreneurs who live in the state, who are now very active in developing new technologies, new products to move us towards green technology. So with that, I'm going to go right to the questions. And the first question I have is, how can each of us reduce our carbon footprint, both individuals and businesses? Well, obviously, that's what the CLCPA is envisioning us doing. How can people voluntarily move forward now to do that? Where we can, solar panels. We are working in the state legislature right now to try to come up with ways that we can provide more incentives so that it would be cheaper for residents to put solar on their roofs, for businesses to put solar on their roofs. I think anytime people are doing an expansion or new development, that should be the first consideration. And we are also looking at legislation as it relates to this issue in terms of new development in the future to provide incentives to try to make sure that wherever there is new building, it is as green as possible in terms of getting off of fossil fuels and reducing our carbon footprint. How will you ensure LIPA invests in more green electricity generation and begins to invest in district heating? Well, one of the issues with this gets to the core issue of LIPA and the fact that they're supposed to be a public utility, and technically under the law they are a public utility, but they have been operating through a contract with a sole source provider, PSEG. And while LIPA is doing a lot towards trying to move us there, I don't think we are ever going to get to where we ultimately need to be unless we have more of a full public utility. That's why, along with Assemblyman Fred Thiel, I've recently introduced legislation to create a legislative commission to come up with a solid legislative package to move us towards public power. And this is something that there's a year deadline. We will hope to fund it through the budget and come up with a plan so that we can, actually show how a public utility could operate as a true public utility, but also making sure that we're dealing with all the problems we have now with storms, with resiliency, and so many other issues that we have right now with PSEC. Obviously, it's a lot easier if a public utility is moving in the direction of making sure that our policies and our expenditures moving forward are moving us to electric generation and using heating as as a prime component, as opposed to just everything coming from fossil fuels. So that is something that I support, but and if we can continue to push LIPA, perhaps we can look at legislation here and there. But at the end of the day, as long as we continue to operate the way we are with this one contract, this one private company, it makes it more and more difficult to move forward. However, all private companies and LIPA itself is going to have to comply with the CLCPA as well, and they are taking steps towards that, which we are very appreciative of, but I think we need to move a lot quicker. Have you considered closed landfill properties as possible municipal food waste composting sites? The closed landfill adjacent to Covanta in Northport has been recommended by a consultant as a site for composting in Huntington. Can the state support such initiatives or provide leadership to municipalities who are interested? I think that's actually a great idea. Obviously, very familiar with that site, having lived in Huntington, my entire adult life. That is something I think we should be looking towards. We need, as a legislature, to get more aggressive in terms of composting. We've started with some limited legislation, which is really designed more towards supermarkets and larger restaurants. I think we need to be more expansive, but we can't just pass a law to say that restaurants and private sector and homeowners just have to do this. We have to provide the infrastructure. We have to build the infrastructure so that compost waste can be collected, even at curbside, and so that it can be transported at a cost-efficient way to a composting site. So I think using sites like that probably makes the most sense in terms of siting, and that's something I appreciate this question. I think it's a good idea, and I'm going to explore it further. Okay, next question. 1,4-dioxane is ubiquitous. Ubiquitous. I always get that word mixed up. Very dangerous to human health and very difficult to treat, eliminate from water, both waste as well as drinking water. Yet it is an emergent compound existing in most cleansers, detergents, degreasers used by most households today. Moreover, it is not listed as an ingredient on packages because it is a resulting compound from other ingredients. So question parts, why isn't 1,4-dioxane listed? Secondly, why isn't it prohibited in products? I agree. We passed the law to prohibit it as an ingredient effective January 1st, 2022. With some limitations. So we are moving towards that. I think, obviously the 1,4-dioxane that still exists, the legacy contamination still have to be dealt with. When I chaired the Suffolk County Water Authority, we spent millions and millions and millions of dollars in terms of trying to figure out a way that it could be treated and filtered. So that is something that we need to spend a lot of money on in terms of rebuilding, building out our water infrastructure system. The good news is not only is the state put a lot of money in, but thanks to President Biden and our United States Congress, and particularly the majority leader, who we're fortunate to have as our United States, one of our senators from New York, along with Senator Gillibrand, and our entire congressional delegation, including our Congressman Tom Suozzi. We will be getting lots of money into New York that can then be used by all the municipal entities moving forward to help build new water treatment facilities to try to improve the quality of our water. But we also, have to start above the ground and pass laws that we, should have been passed a long time ago to try to reduce what gets there in the first place. School food programs continue to use cheap, non-nutritious, and highly processed foods. When will New York State provide leadership for cooking everything in the schools where chefs design meals around locally produced organic whole foods? Well, actually, we have put more money into the budget for school districts specifically for this purpose. And we're going to continue to do that. And, perhaps the questioner can get back in touch with us, and I'd love to have more of a chat as to some of the issues you're seeing on the ground, because often, legislation we pass, sometimes, it doesn't, the goal is not accomplished if, it isn't being implemented at the local level. During a recent storm in Comset State Park, the New York State Park Service had all of the trees chipped and removed. Chipping trees is a huge contributor to carbon release, and these trees could also have provided great resources to the environment for tree regrowth. Nurse logs provide phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon, water, and more to new saplings through networks. Who is responsible for tree cleanup policy on state lands, and is there legislation directing park managers to keep down trees as close to the original spot as possible, or to remove logs in nearby woods? The answer to your question is I don't think there's any state legislation. So, and I would like to discuss this more with the person who sent in the question. I agree. I think we do need to do more. Let's find out exactly what regulations they are following now, and sometimes perhaps regulations themselves are not being implemented. Maybe there is need for state legislation. I was up there the day after the storm, and it was, and ComSet and homes throughout my district, got hurt badly. But there was this small tract of that spread across the North Shore of Long Island that was, it was not that wide, but where it went, it devastated people's homes, properties, and it went right through Comset State Park. And you just couldn't believe it. I left Main Street Huntington and drove up through Lloyd Harbor, and you saw isolated issues. And then when you got there, of course, the communities nearby as well, it was like a war zone. So we should be looking more at how we are dealing with these disasters and some of these issues, particularly as it relates to trees, because that's one of the beautiful aspects of that. Many of our parks is just being able to walk in so many of the wooded areas there, which many of us have really taken advantage of, particularly during COVID. Planting oysters are fairly easy and inexpensive and a great way to clean our waters. Can New York State support planting oysters in New York Harbor as well as all around Long Island Sound? Well, there's a lot of this going on, not enough. I'm very familiar, obviously, with what we're doing, particularly in Oyster Bay Harbor. We're expanding it into Cold Spring Harbor and Huntington Harbor. There's a lot of community residents that have actually volunteered to participate in many of these programs. And the state has invested money in seeding. We need to do a lot more of this. And it's in most cases, the activity, in many cases, the activities are taking place is not to plant so that we can have beautiful oysters to eat, but it is to actually use the natural process of the oysters themselves, helping to clean up the environment, and with the goal towards one day being part of cleaning up our sound, our bays, our harbors, so that we can have more shellfishing, and that is one of many activities that can take place. Obviously, another very important one is as part of resiliency projects, and again, money coming from the federal government that we can use for this. We need to, across the Long Island Sound and all the harbors and bays that flow out to it, deal with making sure, among other things, stormwater runoff. There is no reason why we cannot have stormwater runoff filtration systems at every major point where these contaminants potentially empty into our waterways. Rain gardens, many of them exist, and they can be expanded, and we need plenty of new ones. Can help with that. It's a natural way to deal with it, and in many cases, just simple filters at the end where the water is discharging into the body of water, and good maintenance of it as well to make sure that it is being replaced on a timely basis. I have requested, but have been unable to get emissions reports from Covanta. Again, the plant in Northport. Why are they protected from supplying this information to the public? I'm not sure why you can't get that information. Emissions should be reported regularly to the DEC. So I would like to follow up with the person who sent this question and get to the bottom of this and see what needs to be done. And if there are some gaps in the law, then that is something that we can look towards legislating. Glyphosate Roundup is a complete disaster all around, contributing to human cancer and devastating the insect population. When is it going to be banned in New York State? We're looking at a lot of common household products to ban completely. We have done some of it, and we need to do more of this. And this is going to be part of our upcoming legislative agenda to see what should be added to the list again of products that we should just ban altogether, or force industry to come up with something that is more compatible with the fact that we live on an island. I have personal experience working with the New York State DEC. It is the most bureaucratic, frustrating organization I've ever dealt with, and environmental challenges will never be resolved with the current organization. How do you plan to make the DEC into a functioning organization? Well, honestly, myself and my staff, we deal with frustrations as well in trying to resolve some problems. We have a lot of success in some areas, others we do not. And I'm not exactly sure, how the legislature could go in and try to micromanage a department such as the DEC. One of the things we have to do is make sure that we have strong leadership, both at commissioner level and at the regional level, which is, often where we deal with folks. We are constantly looking at legislation as well to try to encourage and promote more efficiency, to provide more transparency. But some of it, honestly, also is budget cuts that have existed, over time. There are, many great people working for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. In most cases, they're understaffed, and they're dealing with many more files and instances and issues than one woman or man, has the ability to deal with. So I think we also have to look in terms of what are we doing to make sure that we're providing more online people to DEC so that they can be out there in the communities dealing with these issues on a daily basis. Suffolk County has the country's lowest per capita use of sewers in urban areas. With approximately 1.5 million residents, approximately 28% are connected to an actual sewer system. That means that the other 72%, or over 1 million residents, are using some sort of septic system that allows all the human waste to filter back down into the aquifer. What are you going to do to help Suffolk County install and institute more sewers? Well, this is something I've been pushing throughout my, career, and I'm going to address more of the Long Island Sound. We need to do it on the South Shore as well. I'm more familiar with some of the issues that we're dealing with in the Long Island Sound. We have existing sewage treatment plants that are discharging to right into a body of water, often into a harbor. We have to make sure that enforcement is always there, because these plants are run mostly by municipalities. We have to make sure that we're using the most modern technologies. Again, the federal infrastructure money is going to give a significant amount of money to, number one, make sure that we are upgrading all existing sewage treatment systems that are discharging into a body of water to the best technology that we have today. Secondly, to look where there is limited room for some expansion. Where there is room for expansion, and it all depends on the ecosystem surrounding that plant and what it may be able to contain. But where there is room for expansion to be done in a safe manner, because that can remove people off of existing septic systems. Also looking at new systems to build completely. That gets a little bit more complicated, because where you have larger zoning, more 1 acre, 2 acre zoning, people are spread out. It's a lot more difficult to build a system like that. The other issue is we have to be careful, because if we build too many systems, we have the dilemma of discharging to our surface waters. Again, we're going to make sure that it's clean and it's not hurting our shellfish that we were just talking about. But also, you got to be careful, because it can also result in saltwater intrusion getting into our aquifer and then impacting our drinking water. Flip side of that is building a sewage treatment facility, say a new condo community that's now going to have an on-site septic system that often discharges into the ground. We got to make sure that that doesn't get into the groundwater. And again, that has to be something that is built right, and we're dealing with the ecosystem. I think a large piece of Suffolk County's future is going to be building individual septic systems. Everyone is going to have, those that cannot connect to a municipal sewage system are going to have to take their septic system and convert it into a state-of-the-art individual septic system that filters out the contaminants and is maintained on a regular basis. These are expensive. There are some grant programs coming down. I'm looking to try to explore to do more of that. I've also have legislation that I have written that is going to provide a state tax deduction that can cover the whole cost of it, hopefully, moving forward from your state income taxes. And that could be, part of the picture as well. But that's, I think, the future of what we're going to have to do. For one, I would appreciate seeing some effort by our elected officials who represent Suffolk County to start addressing issues that actually matter to the county and those who live here, rather than telling us how additional green spaces are going to help us. What difference does it make if we'll continue to be exposed to carcinogens in our groundwater and we can't enjoy the parks because of our ill health? You're absolutely right. We have to treat, we have to deal with this on all levels. Open space is important. It's important to protect our natural beauty. It's important to protect our shorelines. We can't, develop everywhere. Our special groundwater protection areas that I've been involved at the local level in working to build, those have to remain as open space, or we're going to lose, our sole source drinking water. But you're right. You can't just say we're doing all this and the problem is solved. That's why, we have to continue to try to use the most up-to-date technology to figure out what is in our air, what is in our water, what is in our land, and what can we do in terms of legislation to ban products from it getting out there in the first place, to reduce the amount of what everybody uses in their own households, and to make sure that there is strong enforcement when people are violating existing laws, and how we need to update them on a regular basis. And also we need, more help at the federal level also, because, many of these laws, the state itself, our hands are tied. We need, federal laws also. And as you know, what is emitted from New Jersey or even Michigan often, floats into New York State. I would like to address the issue of gas leaf blowers and their contribution to air and noise pollution. Some municipalities are attempting to ban them. There's been a discussion of subsidizing electric blowers, but landscape company owners say new machinery is too expensive and electric blowers take longer to do the work, so it would increase the cost to consumers. This is a quality of life as well as an environmental issue. What are Senator Gaughran's thoughts on the commercial use of gas-powered leaf blowers? Well, I believe strongly that local municipalities should be dealing with this and personally banning them. Because I think it's something that we really need to move against, and we got to force I think the industry as well to move to technologies that do not create the problems that is outlined by this questioner. We're also looking at the possibility of state legislation as well. It gets a little bit more complicated when you try to pass something like this on a statewide basis, because one of the issues we have is we have large farming communities upstate on the east end of Long Island. So I think we have, perhaps with some of the money we're getting from Washington, we can build more incentives so that everybody is using technologies that, avoid these types of issues. All right, I think I have some more questions coming in. Okay. Question. Now that there's finally a state constitutional right to clean air and a healthful environment, what are your plans to address unhealthy smoke conditions from excessive open or even indoor burning of wood and other solid fuels within extremely dense suburban neighborhoods where it's really not appropriate? Well, I think, first of all, I think neighbors have to, be mindful of other neighbors, and then just some communities where, outdoor wood burning and, wood fireplaces, in some cases may create a bit of an issue. But I think this is, a difficult area, quite frankly, to legislate. I think people are going to want to use their fireplaces, those who have them, and I'm not sure if this is something that we can legislate up in Albany, but I'm happy to discuss this further with the person who has sent in the question. Okay, well, well, somebody gave their name, so I'm going to give their name. Hello, Jennifer Casey. I'm the chair of the Suffolk County Planning Commission and live in Huntington Station. Revitalization of Huntington Station has been stymied for each past decade because of a lack of wastewater infrastructure. Each summer for days at a time, our beaches close. Our harbors are full of toxic algae blooms. The common denominator is nitrogen, largely from our wastewater. Planning Commission has closely followed the Reclaim Our Waste effort and the development of a science-based sub-watershed wastewater plan hailed by the DEC as one of the best 9 elements plans in New York State. As a former chairman of the Suffolk County Water Authority, keenly aware of this. I'm here tonight to ask if you'll be a champion of wastewater by supporting your partners in the Assembly to introduce legislation. Let the voters decide if they'd like to create a fund and wastewater management district. Well, we've actually been looking at that legislation. I've been talking to Assemblyman Fred Thiel about trying to create some sort of funding to do this. Frankly, I think we may be able to accomplish it with the money that we're getting from the federal government. And one of my top priorities is going to be to try to get that money into Huntington Station so that we can provide, particularly for that community, to be able to access a public sewage system, because that's just one of the main areas of my district. We have the same issue in Oyster Bay Hamlet that we're working towards. But I do agree we need to do this, and I think it has to start by trying to get as much of the money that we have coming forward. And there are a lot of complicated issues as it relates to creating new authorities, creating new taxes, creating new funds. But we are looking at how to do that. What can we do to help the town of Huntington compensate for the loss of pilots when the Northport power plant is finally decommissioned? Well, I think one of the issues we need to look at is, how we are going to make sure that the sites, when they are eventually shut down completely, how can they be retrofitted for a new use so that we can build our energy future. And I think working with local residents and local community, I think it is very possible that we could have clean energy produced on sites such as that moving forward. I felt that we did not get a good agreement with LIPA in the settlement, but the settlement was done. We've moved forward. I was able to get $1 million in additional funding for this year, and I'm hoping to continue it next year for the East Northport School District to be used by the district to reduce the property tax levy for every resident of the district. And one of the issues that we're also looking at now is in school funding moving forward, that we have to recognize that across the state, there are large power plants that are closing down for one reason or another. This problem in Northport was a tax surcharge, but we also have to understand, as we're moving to clean energy, we need to offset the loss of tax revenue to the communities involved, because after all, these communities took the burden of hosting these fossil fuel burning plants for decades. And so we started this year with $1 million from Northport, $1 million also for the North Shore School District that I also represent. We're looking to replicate that next year, but we're also looking for a statewide plan to recognize that there are communities throughout the state that are devastated when these situations happen. So hopefully we'll be able to do more of that moving forward. I would like to suggest that a law be enacted in the state limiting time allowed for vehicular idling. The exhaust emitted by cars and trucks are detrimental both to the environment and to our health. I've seen many situations, including in state parks, where people heedlessly run their engines. School buses and limos are examples of offenders. I think that's a great idea. I will look into it. We all see it. And honestly, probably, speaking for myself, we probably all do it from time to time when we shouldn't be doing it. When we're stopping, waiting to pick somebody up or whatever. So I think that is something worthy of looking into. Unless we get the biggest polluters in the world to stop polluting the air and the water, we are wasting money. Nothing from New York State will help. Well, look, I think we have to continue to try. We have to continue to fight, do the best we can. Money is not going to solve every problem. Every law in the world that we passed in the environmental area is not going to work if people don't cooperate and people don't respect their neighbors. Your work on the environment is noble, but if you don't start doing something about your colleagues who have increased my family's cost of living with higher gas prices, higher food prices, home prices, and high heating oil prices, you'll be looking for a new job come November. I'm not here to discuss a political race because I'm here on a government salary over my official Senate account. But the questioner is, I think, raising a real issue, and that is, whenever we deal with environmental challenges and changes, we have to recognize that there is an economic impact to it. And in fact, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act was designed to have various climate councils that are looking at all these issues, who will now be presenting recommendations both to the state DEC, the governor, and to the state legislature as to how we move forward. And in the legislation we passed, we mandated that business representatives from all sectors of our society are at the table, involved in this, and that we are recognizing that there are economic issues with all of this, not just economic issues, but also issues in terms of employment issues, that as we move to different types of greener energies, it has the potential to put people out of work. So we need to help with retraining, transitioning people to new jobs, but we also have to recognize that as we move forward with legislation and other and even regulations, that there is an economic impact to this, and we have to factor that, and we have to move accordingly so that we're not hurting our environment, our economy, as we're improving our environment. What I've seen so far is that the exact opposite is happening. What is happening is it is bringing in so many new industries and businesses to this state, both large and small. Many people, including constituents of mine, have become entrepreneurs and are developing part of the new technologies that are going to make us a greener state, a greener world. So it's actually, I believe, having the opposite effect. I think it is moving the economy forward. But at the same token, we have to recognize that the businesses and the employees who are impacted by this, we have to move forward in a way so that we are assisting them as well. And I believe that is the end of the questions that I have. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. And again, feel free to contact my office. Happy to discuss these issues with you some more. And I look forward to future town halls on this and other subjects. So thanks so much and have a great holiday season. And thanks for coming tonight.